You know, Mary and I have had the most incredible journey in our lives, and to find ourselves here in Oxford, where we met 36 years ago. We were college sweethearts here at Ole Miss, and our journeys have taken us all over the world, but we always dreamed of the day that we could come back to Oxford, Mississippi, where we first met and where we fell in love. And being a part of this community has been very interesting, because we can walk in a store and someone will say, oh, it's the Haskells, or we go in a restaurant, what are they eating? And, you know, I had someone in Memphis text me when I was sitting at the Beacon restaurant for breakfast, and they said, there's someone in the booth behind you who just texted me and said that you and Mary are looking at a catalog of patio furniture. And I'm accustomed to people coming up and saying, are you Sam Haskell? And, you know, welcome back to Mississippi. But I was going to Meridian about 6 months ago to give out Mississippi Arts Commission awards to the Teachers of the Year. And I'd gotten there a little bit early, and I knew I was going to have to leave right after it was over, and I went into a filling station, and I had my suit, and I thought, well, I'll just go ahead and gas the car up, because I've got to zippity-doo-dah out of here. And a woman came up to me while I was pumping gas and said, has anyone ever told you you look like Sam Haskell? And I said, you know, I get that all the time. But to be perfectly honest, Sam is a lot thinner and a lot better looking than I am. Go with me, if you will, back to 1964. I was 9 years old. And at age 9, I walked around the streets of Amory, Mississippi with a TV guide in my hand, telling anyone who would listen to me what was coming on television that night, what was going to win in the ratings. I was a statistician of television. I knew that who was winning the Emmys. I knew that Bonanza was the #1 show on television on NBC, and I went to the Ponderosa, you know, every Sunday night with the Cartwright boys. I could tell you that Carol Channing was going to win the Tony for Hello Dolly that year. I could tell you that the Beatles were the best new artists of the year at the Grammys, and I could even tell you that Donna Axum, Miss Arkansas, had just won Miss America. I knew all that and more, and anyone who would listen to me knew that I would tell them, when I grow up, I'm going to Hollywood. And I'm sure that every single person in Amory, Mississippi behind my back would just go, bless his heart. But my mother would say, you never know, you never know. That very year, Procter & Gamble came out with a commercial for Cheer detergent. And a man was in a little Cheer suit with the logo colors on his hat and his coat, and he would look right into the camera on a commercial during Bonanza, and he would say, I'm the Cheer man, and I'm coming to your town. And if you can show me a box top from Cheer, I'll give you $10. Well, I was absolutely sure that he was coming to Amory, Mississippi. So I wasn't content that my mother used Cheer. So I went down to the local poster shop and I bought poster paper and paints and glitter, and I made this giant Cheer logo and put it out in the front yard. He had to know where he was stopping, right? 405 South 3rd Street in Amory, Mississippi. The Cheer sign was in the yard. Well, it became the butt of all jokes. I mean, my friends thought it was hysterical and made fun of me. My own father even made fun of me. I mean, he would come in from playing golf with his buddies and go, hey, Sammy. Yeah, back then I was Sammy. My grandfather was Big Sam, my father was Little Sam, and I was Sammy, and I hated that. In fact, my grandparents were Sam and Mary Haskell, my parents were Sam and Mary Haskell, my wife and I are Sam and Mary Haskell, and our children are Sam and Mary Haskell. So it's real easy to remember us, but I digress. Sammy, show us your Cheer sign. And he'd just laugh. You know, oh, he's coming, I would say. The Cheer man's coming. Fast forward to the Friday before Labor Day of 1965. It's now a year later. And I've been waiting. But that Cheer sign has been taken from the front yard, rolled up, put under the bed in my room. And it's my brother's birthday. And we're playing football in the front yard. My dad's grilling burgers, my mother's working on the cake in the kitchen. And down the street we hear, Cheer, Cheer, Cheer is here, Cheer. And we go running down to the curb and we look down 3rd Street, and coming down 3rd Street is the little Cheer car. And all the kids in the neighborhood are following it like the Pied Piper of Hamelin. I said, I've got to get my Cheer sign. I didn't stop for a minute to think he might be stopping somebody else's house. If he was in Amory, Mississippi, he was coming to my house. So I run in, I get my sign, and just as I run out on my front porch, the little Cheer car stops right in front of my house. I hold up my sign. And he goes, young man, you get the $10. My father was apoplectic. How is this possible? This kid has been waiting for you for a year and a half. How is it possible that you would end up in this small little town in Mississippi? And the chairman said, now remember, it's 1965. The chairman says, well, you know, sir, we have this new thing called a computer. Now, in my mind, a computer in 1965 was this like refrigerator size, you know, machine with blinking lights all over it like you'd see in a sci-fi movie. We have this computer, and into the computer went all the addresses of every registered voter in the United States. And the computer randomly selected 2 addresses in every county in every state in the country. And 405 South 3rd Street in Monroe County, Mississippi was chosen, and it's just taken us a long time to get here. So I learned at a very young age what blind faith was. Not the kind of blind faith I had learned in Sunday school, but the kind of blind faith that comes with preparation and execution and determination and belief in a dream. When I released Promises I Made My Mother, I started a 160-city book tour. I have been all over this great country of ours, even to Afghanistan. Mothers and sons have responded to this book especially, and the Department of Defense contacted me and said, Sam, would you come over to Afghanistan for about 10 days? You know, we'll bring you with a load of books. And I had this little corporal with a duffel bag that would follow me around, and they would take me out by Black Hawk helicopter out into the war zone in Afghanistan, and we would run, because when you're in certain areas that are in the war zone, it's not really protected, and they would always tell us to run. And so my little corporal would be behind me, and he would be pushing me to run faster, and we'd get inside, and I'd talk to those men and women, and we shared a lot. And what you need to know, and I think this is very important, what you need to know is that most of those kids are 18, 19, and 20. I was flown from Kuwait into Bagram Air Force Base on a C-17 by a 20-year-old. And these kids really want to be there. They don't feel like they're forced to be there. They want to be there. And it gave me such pride in this country. And I just think you ought to know that. But I have had my finger on the pulse of what's going on in this country for the last 2 years. And traveling around this country and meeting people and talking to them like I'm talking to you has given me a new vision of what this country is. And I'm going to tell you something. It's very simplistic. It's very simplistic. And what Peter said about getting off your Blackberries and off your computers and shaking hands with people and looking them in the eye and speaking to them. This Blackberry stuff, and I'm just as guilty as anybody, but this Blackberry stuff and computer stuff is not helping you build relationships. Once you have the relationship, you can maintain it that way, but you're not going to get a relationship on a Blackberry. Eyeball to eyeball, person to person, handshake to handshake. That's how you do it. And I really appreciate you saying that, Peter, because it's something I think about and it's something I preach about all the time. But the little lessons that I talk about in the book I wrote that is an homage really to my mother are the little lessons that I learned about character and integrity and humility and honesty and faith. Things that seem quite simplistic in their explanation, but I promise you they're profound in their execution. And never was that more evident to me than when I was negotiating a deal for one of the biggest television shows in TV history, and that's the show Everybody Loves Raymond. Ray Romano was my friend and client for many years before that show went on the air, and we had tried to put him in several different kinds of television shows, and the one that I thought was going to work for him was a show called News Radio that my other client, Phil Hartman, was in at the time. But Ray got fired after 3 episodes. They just said, we just don't believe him. He's not an actor. He's not an actor. And we tried a couple of guest shots and some things, and they didn't work. But he went on the David Letterman show, and he did his stand-up comedy, which was all about his life. And he talked about his kids, and he talked about his wife, and he talked about the trouble with being a husband and the trouble with being a father. And it was really some funny stuff. And David Letterman took a liking to him and had him on multiple times. I went to my friend Leslie Moonves, who you saw in the video, and I said, Les, I believe that if we can do a series about Ray Romano's life and just let him play himself, that is the best way to capture him. Well, we put a deal together. We did a pilot. I filled it up with my friends, Doris Roberts and Brad Garrett and Patricia Heaton, and we put his little family together. The pilot was hysterical, but it was one of the last pilots chosen that year because no one knew who Ray Romano was. But Leslie Moonves trusted the fact that we'd put a lot of effort into this and he wanted to give it a shot. I also that year had sold a new show starring Bill Cosby, which was the third incarnation of The Cosby Show. And it was like the big deal of the year. We got 22 episodes a year for 2 years, so 44 episodes committed, and he was going on the air and guaranteed to go on the air, and all he had to do was just execute that pilot. Ray Romano got 13 shows ordered for the fall, put on Friday night. Critically acclaimed, hysterical show, but no one was watching. Why? People are out at high school football games. No one really watches television on Friday night. And I was watching this little jewel that I had fallen in love with start to decline. Its ratings were terrible. It had fallen into like the 80s, which in primetime network television back in the mid-90s was really bad. And I could sense a cancellation coming. I'd been through this numerous times. Now, yes, I had my share of hits, and Elizabeth was very kind to mention some of those, but for every one of those hits, there were 20 failures. And you cherish the hits because you know that the same effort goes into that hit that goes into every one that has failed. And I just couldn't let Raymond fail. And Bill Cosby, who I affectionately referred to as my Uncle Bill, knew that I loved Ray Romano, and he was having great success on CBS that season. And he called me one day and he said, "Why don't you get Les Moonves on the phone with you and me, and let's talk to him about scheduling Raymond after me on Monday nights." I went, yes, okay, great. So we called Les Moonves, and we get him on the phone, and I'll give you just a 60-second version of what was a 2-hour conversation. But Bill Cosby helped convince Les Moonves that Sam's little show should go after him on Monday nights for 2 trial weeks in May. And this was the critical time because May is when they decide what they're picking up for the following fall. Raymond goes on after Bill Cosby and jumps from the 80s to the 20s in 2 weeks. Raymond was scheduled for a full 22 episodes the next year following Cosby and stayed there until Cosby was canceled 3 years later, and Raymond stayed on the air for 10 years, won 32 Emmys, and is going to be on the air in syndication for the next 50 years. It's airing sometimes 3 times a day in over 150 countries around the world. It's been dubbed in multiple languages, but it almost didn't make it past the 6th year. And what do you think that reason could have been? What was it about? Or the M word? Money. It's about money. Because you see, after 6 years, contracts on television shows expire. And if you've got a hit, you can go back in and renegotiate the deal to keep it on the air. But in negotiating the deal for the show, you also have to negotiate the deal with the actors. And the show is named for Raymond, Ray Romano, so the first deal to be done was for Ray Romano. I was his agent and friend, and his lawyer was a man named John Moonves, brother of Leslie Moonves, the chairman of CBS. So I thought, we got this in the bag. We go in for our first meeting. He orders us out of the office. "I'll never pay that. I'll never make that deal. Get out." For the next 6 months, and Leslie Moonves, by the way, was one of my really good friends. This was a real testament to relationships and how they would be maintained. But the brother-to-brother relationship became so volatile that his mother could not invite them both to Thanksgiving that year. Sometimes our meetings would be 15 or 20 people, and sometimes our meeting would just be the 3 of us. And on one of those meetings in December of that year, it was just me, Leslie Moonves, the chairman of CBS, and his brother, John, who was Ray Romano's attorney. And we had come back with what we thought was a compromise. Because I had learned at the knee of one of my mentors, a man named Louis Weiss at the William Morris Agency, when I first started, that the real secret to good business is to negotiate a deal even when you have all the leverage that leaves a few dollars on the table so that people can come away feeling like they've both won something. So even with all the leverage, if you leave a few bucks on the table, the day will come when you have no leverage at all, and that person who you built a relationship with might give you those few bucks back when you need it, when you really need it. So we had come back to Leslie Moonves with what we thought was a compromise. And again, I'll never pay it, get out. And I'm like, and I'm not kidding about how this was going down, and I'm probably making it a lot nicer than it really was. Get effing out, you know. And so I'm packing up my stuff, and John goes. And so we sit there. And Leslie gets up, and he goes to his desk, which in this office of his, I mean, it's like a palace. So he goes over to, like over in that corner, and we're sitting over here in the sofa section, and he's over at his desk. And I'll try to do this without hurting this laptop, but he starts answering email, and it's like this. And I look at John, I'm going, John just goes. And we sit in silence while he's hunting, pecking, answering his email. This is one of the most important men in Hollywood. Peter knows that. And after about 5 minutes, which seemed like an hour, John, his brother, says, you know, Les, if you'll close this deal Sam just generously put on the table, I'll personally buy you some typing lessons. And he fell out laughing, and the deal was made in 24 hours. Relationships. Relationships. Ray Romano's deal is done. The deal to continue the series into the 7th season is done. But we don't have deals with Brad Garrett or Doris Roberts or Patricia Heaton or Peter Boyle. So we go and we offer them a ton of money. But they didn't care about the money. They wanted back-end points. They wanted profit participation because they knew that once the show had reached the 6th year that it was going to go into syndication. Now, no one at the time knew that it was going to go into syndication the way it finally went into syndication. But let me just say this. One adjusted gross percentage point with a good definition on a hit show like Raymond or Seinfeld or Friends can be worth $8 million over 10 years. One profit point. Ray had a lot of profit points. He had a good agent. But the other cast members did not. And the other cast members had won Emmys just like Ray. The other cast members were known as the stars of Raymond. And obviously we couldn't do the show without them, even though I did have Raymond. The first day of production of the 7th season, the only people to show up on the set were Ray Romano, John Movis, and Sam Haskell. The cast had called in sick. They couldn't just not show up because then they'd be in contempt of their contracts. So they called in sick. And we waited. And they called in sick the next day. And the next day, and we had to scrap the first episode of production, which meant that the studio lost a lot of money on that episode because it had already been spent on all the people that, you know, managed to run an episode of a show, which is some 300 people on a hit show. And we knew we had to do something. And I had remembered a principle that my mother had taught me about a blessing is not a blessing unless it's shared. Blessing's not a blessing unless it's shared. Ray Romano had been very blessed. We all had been very blessed. This was a huge success, and a lot of people were going to make a lot of money on Raymond, especially when it went into syndication all over the world. And we started talking about deals, and Ray wanted to know every penny we had offered the other cast members. And I told him. And he said, what did the studio say when you said you wanted to give them the points that they so desperately want? I said, they stonewalled us. They're not giving anything up. He said, what if I give some of mine up? And I remember that little story, Stone Soup, that my mother read to me when I was 6 years old. The concept of which everybody puts something in the pot to create a stew that can feed the world. Ray Romano put points in that pot. I then put points in that pot. The studio then put points in that pot. And we served up a stew that gave each of those cast members a nice big taste of what that back-end syndication money could be, and everybody came back to work. The moral of that story is understanding that you're blessed, having relationships, and knowing how to share. And sometimes the people that have the hardest time sharing are those who are the most successful. When you are at your most successful, and I have to believe that each of you want to be successful, when you are at your most successful, that's when you must be your most humble. That's when you have to be willing to share. That's when you have to try to extend yourself to help someone less fortunate. And less fortunate doesn't necessarily mean poor. Less fortunate could be someone who hasn't quite reached their dream level yet. If you've got the capacity to dream, and you've got the willingness to fight for that, prepare for that, and then execute the roadmap, you can do anything. I was doing a lecture at UCLA about 10 years ago, and this whole concept ended up being a whole chapter in my book. But I had been asked to come in and lecture on the state of the television business, which I knew like the back of my hand. And what I ended up doing was not just doing a lecture about the state of the television business, but how to be a good person in the television business. And after I finished the lecture, the entire class stayed for another 2 hours of Q&A. I think they were really taken with this concept of doing the right thing and trying to help others and trying to be a good person. A lot of times you're not taught that. You have to learn that. But I'm telling you right now that if you can meet people and look them in the eye and shake their hands and show them that you're a good person, you'll get a lot more out of them in the business world than if you think you're going to create some other persona. And the other thing is you've got to be real. Don't try to be happier because you think they want you to be happy, or tougher because you think they want you to be tougher, or more charming, or whatever. Just be who you are. Put who you really are out there. That's what they'll respond to. My mother used to say to me, stand in the light of God's grace and be real. Don't be fake. Be real. So what you get is a lot more success. And in this concept that I talk about in this lecture, it's called being thoughtfully political. And if I were to say, what does that mean? And I mean thoughtful not to be kind, thoughtful to think. Think about what you want. Think about who's going to help you get it. And then think about how to make them happy to give it to you. And you can have anything. I'm a living, walking example of what being thoughtfully political is all about. And it's all about relationships. In every interview I give, it's all about relationships. And when you create them and you nurture them and you keep them around you, you'll be able to do anything that you want to do. When my book first came out, my first interview was with Matt Lauer on the Today Show. And I'd been through, author interviews with clients for years, and I knew that authors were only given 4 minutes, and I knew that they were in the 2 chairs facing each other just off the plaza, and I knew that there was no prep time, and I knew that the first question would come and then they would just take it from there, and I was ready. And so, my publishers took me in and they said Matt will be in about 30 seconds, and he and at that time Meredith were out on the plaza. And he comes running in, oh my God, Sam Haskell, I was just going to read the foreword by Ray Romano, but then I couldn't put it down. I stayed up all night. I'm going to ask you to tell me four stories in 4 minutes. And we're back. Now, what Southerner do you know can tell any story in 4 minutes, much less one? The interview lasted 9 minutes. And all the stories were told, and he was engaged, and he wanted to know more. And at the end of the interview, he said to me, Sam, what do you want people to take from this book? And I said, I want people to think of their own mothers for a little while. And I want them to think about something their mothers taught them that they're able to use today in their lives, in their businesses. It might be something as simple as being kind. It might be to write a thank you note, a handwritten thank you note. And then I want them to call their mothers and thank them. And if, like me, you have to look heavenward to thank them, then you do that. And then you make some promises of your own. I believe in dreams. I believe in Mississippi. I believe in Ole Miss. And I believe that we live in the greatest country in the world. And it is waiting for you. It is waiting for you to make your mark, and no one will applaud louder than I when you do. God bless.